thank you so much for your company this Saturday morning. Really, really appreciate your company. And I'm here between now and 1 o'clock. And actually, very exciting news, I'm actually going to be here tomorrow between 4 o'clock and 7 o'clock, filling in for Kevin O'Sullivan. So you'll get quite a lot of me over the next couple of days. And of course next week is going to be a big political week again, although we're in the middle of recess. People saying, why is Keir Starmer on holiday, or why was he on holiday in Mallorca? We'll be talking about that a bit later in the programme as well. But before all that, we're going to get a paper review. Now we're going to look inside this morning's papers. Max is here from Bright Blue. How are you doing? Very nice to see you.
Good to see you, Peter.
Yeah, it's your first paper review, I think, is that right?
Yeah, first ever paper review. Very
Max
excited.
Sanderson from Bright Blue. It's very, very nice to see you. Nervous?
Oh, always a bit nervous before these things, but you know,
you've got to get the adrenaline flowing. One thing that isn't flowing as much as it has been is petrol and diesel. And you've noticed a really interesting story about the Taxpayers Alliance saying Britain would get a £17 billion boost if fuel duty was cut by 20p. Explain this to us.
Well, it seems like every solution at the moment from all the Conservative candidates is tax cut. And here we go. Here's another one: 20p tax cut. I'm a little bit sceptical of this. I'm a little bit worried, and I'll tell you why. Every time we look at a tax cut, we have to ask ourselves two questions. One, is it feasible? This is a lot of money that the Treasury is going to lose at a time when, let's be honest, people are going to be relying on public services a lot more than before. So I'm a bit worried about that aspect. But as well, is this actually going to help the people we want it to help? A lot of people are from lower income households aren't or don't own a car. So how much is this actually going to help the people who are really going to start?
Although the majority of journeys in this country are by car, I think a lot of the media, especially London-based media, focuses a lot on trains. Anytime there's a train strike, another train strike today, for example, has a huge focus on that, and they forget that the majority of people get to work in their cars rather than by trains or buses.
No, of course. So I think we shouldn't be completely London sceptic, which is why I think this is actually still an important story to talk about.
Will it work, though, in terms of, I mean, the Taxpayers Alliance often come up with these kind of ideas, but it's saying if this happens, the economy would grow by 0.53% by attracting £4 billion more in investment. I mean, is this a goer, do you think? Will this work?
Well, I'm not sure about that, especially, you know, we've got to be really sceptical about this, and I'm not completely convinced at this moment in time. But no, I don't think this should be a policy that can go ahead, and tax cuts can't be the whole entire solution to causing growth. That's not the answer. Tax cuts
Well, it's also how quickly is it going to happen? Because Liz Truss is obviously someone who's talked about a lot of tax cuts. She said she'd cut taxes from day one. But in terms of the energy side of things, we're going to see bills rising even this month. The energy cap is going to rise again in October. So, I mean, tax cuts may well work in the longer term, but in the short term, the people need help now, don't they?
Exactly. And this is something I've been slightly concerned about with the Conservative candidates as a whole, is tax cuts are not the whole entire solution. I mean, you need to be thinking about cash transfers or uplifting universal credits. There's so many levers that they could pull on, but tax cuts cannot be the be-all and end-all. I think that's also something, it's not just the Conservative candidates who are not offering enough in terms of in-depth rational policies, it's also Labour. We've almost had to look towards Gordon Brown now to come up with a manifesto in a weird way to be actually come up with some genuine solutions.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? I mean, Gordon Brown, who hasn't been the Prime Minister for 12 years, is someone who is putting forward the solution. We're going to talk about that in some depth, actually, later in the programme. Thanks as well to Jackie. We're just going to talk about the drought now. Jackie has been in touch. Forgive me, but I live in South Derbyshire, and May and early June were positively Arctic, so let's enjoy a couple of weeks of Mediterranean weather. It won't last because a drought has been declared in most of southern and eastern England and parts of the Midlands after the driest year since 1976, the driest summer in 50 years. Tell us what the papers are reporting about this, Max.
Well, obviously, there's a lot of concern about the droughts, and I can completely see why. And particularly on farmers, I'm slightly concerned about, because they not only have to keep their crops going, and there's concerns about yield certainly dropping drastically, but also keeping their animals alive effectively. During these hot weathers, they're going to need a lot more water to keep their animals fed. I think this also talks another side of net zero as well. We've heard so much about moving towards decarbonisation, and I think that's actually, if we look at Boris Johnson's tenure, I think that's something he could actually be proud of when he looks back and sits back in September. But we need to think about resilience, because this is not going to be the first time we're going to have hot weather, nor is it going to be the last. And we're going to see more and more extreme weather conditions. And I think we have to be start to actually invest in this infrastructure. Because I don't know about you, I can't work in 40-degree heat. So productivity is going to be hurt by this. But also we saw...
But this is just a few days of the year. I mean, you're saying it's going to get worse and so on. You're saying that net zero, you said, is one of Boris Johnson's big achievements. I mean, is it worth it? Is all the sacrifice and all the kind of move towards net zero? Because if you look at the actual emissions of the UK globally, they're very small indeed.
Well, just because we're the best at it doesn't mean we shouldn't continue moving. It's just, if I know there's a lot of concern about China, for example, not necessarily moving in the right direction, but just because China aren't doing it doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing it. It is the right thing to do. And we should also consider the economic benefits of this. If we can become, this is where things are going. This is where people are going to move. This is where countries would like to move. And if we can get ahead of everybody, if we can be the real leaders in climate technology, that will put us at the forefront of the next revolution in terms of like the next where all countries move to. It keeps us relevant. It keeps us powerful in economic terms. And when we're talking about being in an economic crisis, why would we not want to look to something that really, really can help boost jobs, provide really well-paid jobs, and look at this in an innovative way? I think.
Well, one of the things a lot of our viewers and listeners get in touch about is the fact that something like a sixth of many energy bills, are made up with what some people call green taxes, a sort of levy for net zero and moving towards green energy and so on. Certainly, I mean, if Liz Truss said she was going to cut that, for example, that would be a big vote winner, but you presumably wouldn't think that's a good idea.
Yeah, I'm quite concerned about that suggestion, mainly because if we cut the green levy, that's not going to help us continue to move to actually weaning ourselves off oil and gas. This, with the green levy, it will help us only increase with the amount of renewable, moving towards renewable energies, which will help then, in turn, decrease the cost that it is for electricity and fuel. So we've got to think about this not just about short term. This isn't, we're looking at what everything the Bank of England's saying. This is not going to be a short term issue. It's not just going to be for the winter. It's going to be the winter and beyond.
But let me put, sorry to interrupt you, Max, let me just put a couple of thoughts from our viewers and listeners to you. One texter says, Peter, does your reviewer think only the poorest without cars are feeling the squeeze? I mean, I don't think you do, for example. Peter, your chap on the show saying we don't want taxes reduced on petrol is flipping stupid. Why are you having him on your show? What a stupid thing to say. Yes, we do. Thank you very much indeed. So how would you respond to those?
I mean, both completely right. We want to see, as much as we possibly can, fuel duty. We want to try and see fuel prices go down. So they are completely right. I just don't think necessarily going through green levies and cutting fuel duty is necessarily the right way. But they are completely right. That's something that we certainly want to see. And I'm not sitting here saying I'm against taxes. I mean, I come from a liberal conservative think tank. Of course, we think cutting taxes is a good thing.
Tax should be as low as possible, yeah.
But that has to be done sensibly, and that has to be done in the right way. It can't just be cutting taxes for the sake of cutting taxes.
OK, thank you very much indeed for that. And we'll come back to you in just a minute as well. So thanks very much indeed. Lots of reaction to the Salman Rushdie story. This attack on Salman Rushdie is a big story, says Mitch in North London, but not one that warrants a big debate, Peter. Basically, a man who wrote a book that offended some religious extremists has been attacked by a religious extremist. That's it in a nutshell. We know that these people exist, and we know that if we do or say something to upset them, they will resort to acts of violence by way of retribution. Mitch, you've summed it up very, very well, of course, but I think it is worth defending free speech and talking about free speech and saying that we should look at the motivations of these people, but you've summed it up very, very well indeed. Thank you very much indeed for that. We're going to talk a lot more about the weather. We're going to talk a lot more about Salman Rushdie. We're going to talk a lot more about the papers with Max Anderson from Bright Blue in just a few minutes here on Talk TV. A very good morning to you if you're just joining us. A real pleasure to have your company. And I also have the company of Max Anderson from Bright Blue Think Tank. Max, shall I read you some more reaction, shall we say?
Go for it. I love some feedback.
I'm not sure you're going to love it. What an absolute idiot Max Anderson is. His idea for our wee country to decimate our economy to decrease our emissions 2% and China's 24%. China will be laughing their socks off. What a nutter, says Maisie Cat Crazy. Thank you for that, Maisie. Yeah, lots on Salman Rushdie as well. We'll get to in a minute as well. The green levy should be suspended now, says Pete. Many people can't afford their fuel bills. Thank you very much indeed for that. Another one for you, Max. Morning, Peter. Sorry, but your guest is talking nonsense. Net zero is economic sabotage. Where's your guest's evidence that even if we get to net zero, it will affect climate change? There's no evidence to prove this. What do you make of that one, Max?
I mean, your views obviously feel very passionate about it. I'll try not to take it to heart, but honestly, there are other I understand the frustration. I understand why people think that cutting the green levy, understandably, when you can see what you can save, is the right approach. But frankly, there are other ways around this, and the long-term economic benefits and just the moral long-term way of trying to keep our planet safe and better and so we can live in. I think it's hard, and I understand that people are really, really struggling.
But it's interesting, actually, when you sort of think about, we'll get back to the papers in a second, but when you think about what Rishi Sunak is saying, I mean, that's a lot of his message. That's a lot of his message sort of saying, look, we can't reduce taxes because there's so much to do, there's so much we sort of have to pay for, and green energy is kind of one of those aspects.
It's not to say that we shouldn't be cutting taxes. I mean, for example, there are some elements that we should be looking and thinking, right, this is ripe for that can be cut. For example, the national health and social care levy that came in, there's the employer's side of that could easily be cut. That's being passed on to employees, and that actually, if you cut, would help growth because it would give companies more money in their pocket. So I am not saying cutting taxes is not what we want.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that we have to be really sensible about looking at the short term and the long term here, and we have to continue our move to net zero. And it will be a huge economic boost, especially for people who are living in left-behind areas. Let's not forget, levelling up should be also something we still should keep in mind, although I worry that
Has that been forgotten a little bit?
I am really worried that it's going to be forgotten, although it seems like now Lisa Nandy's picking up the levelling up phrase, which is it would be quite interesting if Labour just pick up their policy. Yeah. But we have to actually understand that what the benefits can do. It also is what we've got to remember that we look at the steel industry. The steel industry is really struggling at the moment because other industries are decarbonising much quicker than ours. And you listen to everybody on experts in the steel industry. They're saying they desperately need help to decarbonise. Otherwise, they're going to be undercut. At that point, we'll see the steel industry disappear. Now, either we support the steel industry decarbonise, or we need something to replace it. And there you go. You have net zero jobs, climate technology that can replace it. Or indeed, if we do both, we can see a boost. Yeah, really interesting stuff. Max, if you want to respond to anything Max is saying or anything we've discussed this morning, whether it's about the weather, whether it's about Salman Rushdie or anything that we discussed now or between now and 1 o'clock, you can give us a call on 0344 499 1000. Lucy is waiting to take your calls, and you can text me on 87222. Just put talk in your message so it comes through on the screen in front of me. And you can also tweet me at TalkTV or indeed at Peter Cardwell. Now, Thursday is going to be a big day because A-level students are getting their results, but tens of thousands of them are at risk of losing a place at their preferred university after new analysis found a sharp fall in top grades compared with last year. How do they know this if the grades aren't out already, Max? Well, you can get a little bit of a... obviously, you start to get the grades being coming in now. You can kind of get a rough idea. You can work out sometimes quite early on these things when what you can expect the overall grades to be given. But I think this is actually quite a worrying thing. I'm sorry to keep going on the doom and gloom. It seems like that's all anyone seems to be talking about. But education is certainly something we need to be aware of is an issue, especially over COVID. The effects that had on students will be quite drastic of all ages.
And for such a long time.
And for such a long time as well.
Because if you're, I mean, we have the first group in a number of years now actually doing exams. And it's fascinating because if you're an employer sitting there in a few years' time, you're saying, well, hold on a second, weren't you the COVID year? Weren't you the year where you didn't actually sit the exams? Are you going to take that person as seriously as the person who actually did sit their exams? And that's very, very unfortunate for those people who didn't actually sit their exams because of COVID.
Well, I hope that doesn't happen because at the end of the day, they still would have gone to university. They still would have gotten their degree from university. So I'm optimistic that I'm just thinking about jobs that maybe you don't need a university degree for. Very possibly. I think that is actually a general concern that I hadn't necessarily considered. We got to be aware of that, but also it's then just an element of trust. And do you trust the teachers who have awarded those grades that actually the student is capable? And they have been awarded a grade that, at the end of the day, that's what their teacher thinks they deserve.
How nervous were you when you got your A-level results?
I was pretty nervous when I got mine. I felt okay. I knew I studied. Maybe a little bit last minute, but...
I heard it was an absolutely brilliant piece of advice I was once given. I was actually when I was doing my GCSEs. Now, this is over 20 years ago now. And someone said, exams are worth the effort, but they're not worth the stress. And I thought that was a really, really good thought. And one thing, speaking of things that are worth something, furious West Ham fans have cried foul at being charged £9.50 for a small hamburger. I mean, this is crazy. This is the Hammers London Stadium was branded robbery and a scam by their supporters online. The burger doesn't even come with chips. £7.60 for a pint of Heineken. Lager, £4.50 a bottle. £4.50 for a bottle of Coca-Cola. £4.50. That's crazy. Packet of crisps, £2.50. Why are things? One of their fans has called them West Scam.
Oh, no.
Why are things at West Ham so expensive?
Well, I mean, I'm a huge sports fan, so this isn't even happening, unfortunately, just at West Ham. This is happening everywhere. And I mean, even just to try and get tickets at the moment to try and go and see a game, especially Premier League games, is near impossible. I mean,
supply and demand, I suppose.
I know supply and demand, but it's getting to the point of, well, you know, I want to go and see Arsenal go and play, and it's near impossible. It's slightly depressing at the moment. There's been a lot, you know, the government are looking at this, and I think there will be interesting suggestions that come out over the year.
But essentially, if West Ham wants to charge, I mean, if people are going to pay £9.50 for a hamburger, they're going to pay £9.50 for a hamburger.
You kind of don't really have a choice, which is a bit upsetting at this point.
Well, the choice is don't eat the hamburger or bring your own food.
Exactly.
I went to Wimbledon a couple of years ago, which was lovely, but you could bring all your own food and everything. I mean, I did buy strawberries and cream because I thought, like, you can't
not go with that.
You can't not do that. Speaking of, I struggle to say the word cultural events. Eurovision is another story in the papers you've seen, and Glasgow is apparently the front runner to host the event. And both politicians from the Scottish National Party and ALBA, which is a sort of splinter group that Alex Salmond has, saying that Scotland should be allowed to have its own contestant in Eurovision. I mean, I'm a unionist and I'm against Scottish independence, but is there something in this? I mean, we have a Scottish football team, for example, a Scottish rugby team. Why should they not have their own European Eurovision entry? I
mean, my personal opinion is of it. If Scotland actually put forward the proclaimers for the Eurovision, then that's a win for me. I can easily accept that.
Well, the thing is, I mean, surely if there were the proclaimers, they should go. The contest should not be in Glasgow but in London, because then they could walk 500 miles.
Maybe it should be then. I mean, surely then you want to go Brighton, just make it a little bit longer.
Yeah, well, exactly. But, I mean, I'm not sure we should be encouraging even more songs into Eurovision. I have a friend who's an absolute nut for Eurovision. But it is interesting. I mean, of course, Britain has stepped up now that Ukraine have won but can't do it. So this is going to be a really big thing for the UK.
No, I think it's a fantastic thing to come back. And I know it's disappointing. You know, I wanted it to be in London. But I think it's also great. We talked about levelling up earlier. It's great that it's going to be either in a northern city or it's going to be in Scotland. I think that I'm not that big of a fan of Eurovision, but even I'm getting a little bit excited about it. It'll be great to see it come back after, I think, nearly 25 years it's been since Eurovision has been here.
Love Shine a Light was the winner, Katrina and the Waves, in, I think, 1997. Is that correct? Around that time anyway. In fact, Terry Wogan, I remember saying that he would not, who was the commentator who commentated on Eurovision for such a long time before Graham Norton took it over, said that he would resign as commentator if Love Shine a Light did not win, Katrina and the Waves, who my friend Alison once said looks like every hairdresser she's ever had. So there we are. And I mean, this is fascinating. I think Eurovision is it's really really interesting that Vladimir Putin and other neighbouring countries would have an he claimed that it would show Vladimir Putin, this is a Scottish SNP politician, saying that a Scottish entry would show Vladimir Putin that neighbouring countries could have an international personality while still being calm and rational towards one another. So, I mean, Scotland having an entry, actually putting it up to Vladimir Putin, I'm not sure sitting at his long table he's going to worry that much about this.
Well, I mean, the same was saying that, you know, if we cut Russia out of Eurovision, what actual effect would it have? But every little bit helps, I suppose. You've got to do everything you can to try and support people in Ukraine, so it's every little step.
It's a fair point. Max, thank you very much indeed. Max Anderson from the Bright Brew think tank there with our paper review.